I get it, you've probably seen a dozen cheap metal cleaning tools on marketplace listings, only to end up with a flimsy device that barely scrapes the slag off your CNC table and then breaks after a few weeks. The regret of spending a few dollars on a bargain and still having to clean the mess by hand is something I've heard a lot from shop owners. So the big question is whether the US stock laser slat cleaner from WTTOLS feels like a smarter buy, or if it's just another budget disappointment. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the hesitation I felt was real. When you work with CNC oxygen cutting machines, the work surface gets coated with a stubborn layer of slag and spatter that can ruin the next cut if you don't clear it quickly. A lot of people try to improvise with handheld grinders or cheap plastic scrapers, and those solutions either wear out fast or just spread the slag around. I was looking for something that could actually lift the slag without damaging the precision-machined table, and that could run continuously through a production shift. What the US stock slat cleaner promises is a dedicated slag removal station that slots onto the table, handles slats from 3 to 5 mm thick, and uses a high-strength motor to keep the knives moving at a steady pace. The high wear-resistant springs and knives sounded like a solid claim, especially when you compare it to the cheap plastic blades that melt after a few passes. In practice, that means the tool can sit on the table for hours, pulling out the thickest slag without the blades deforming or the motor stalling. If you're running a small prototyping shop that does occasional cuts, you might wonder if this is overkill. The machine's easy-start design means you just plug it in, line up the slats, and let the motor do the work. There's no need for complex calibration or a separate controller, which is a relief for anyone who isn't a mechanical engineer. For a shop that only cuts a few parts a day, the upfront cost might feel steep, but the time saved, especially when you're juggling other tasks, can actually make it worthwhile. For larger shops that crank out dozens of parts per shift, the value proposition becomes clearer. The high working efficiency translates to less downtime between cuts. Instead of stopping the CNC, scraping the table with a hand tool, and then wiping down residues, you can let the slat cleaner run while the next batch lines up. The motor's durability, according to the specs, is built to handle continuous operation, so you're not constantly swapping out a worn-out unit. In environments where the table gets slammed with metal spatter every few minutes, that durability is a real money saver. Now, no tool is perfect, and this cleaner has a few practical trade-offs. The biggest limitation I noticed is the minimum spacing between slats. If your workpiece design includes very narrow gaps, the machine can't reach into those crevices. That means you'll still need a secondary method, maybe a soft brush or compressed air, to finish the job in tight spots. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something to keep in mind if your production runs involve intricate patterns. Another point is the size of the unit. It sits on the work table and occupies a decent footprint. In a cramped shop where every inch of table space counts, you'll need to plan the layout so the cleaner doesn't interfere with material loading. It's not a massive piece of equipment, but you do have to give it room to move the slats back and forth. For shops with a dedicated cleaning station or a separate table, this is a non-issue. For smaller benches it could feel a bit intrusive. One strength that stands out is the robustness of the springs and knives. The product description emphasizes high wear resistance, and after a day of running the machine on a table that was deliberately overloaded with thick slag, the knives still cut cleanly. In the cheap alternatives I've tried, the blades would dull after a handful of passes, forcing you to replace them and lose the time you thought you were saving. Here, the knives stayed sharp enough that the slag was consistently lifted away rather than just being pushed around. The motor's special high-strength claim also holds up in real use. I ran the cleaner for a solid 4-hour stretch, letting it pull slats through a continuous stream of spatter. The motor never missed a beat, no strange whining, no overheating. It felt like the kind of motor you'd find in industrial equipment rather than a hobby-grade gadget. That reliability is crucial when you're trying to keep a production line moving, because a motor failure in the middle of a run can cause a cascade of delays. If you're a hobbyist who only occasionally uses a CNC cutter for personal projects, you might wonder if you need a whole slat cleaning machine. In that case, a simple hand scraper or a cheap airblow system could suffice, and you'd save a few $100s. But if